I'd like to introduce my good friend Michael Couteau, which is in Don Valley East, right immediately
just north of
west of Victoria.
my neighbor.
So we're adjacent partners.
He's my neighbor.
There you go.
And Rob's.
And Rob's, that's right. He's
Right in between.
And Michael is here today. Now, the fact that he's an MPP, but the fact that he happens to be the Provincial Minister of Citizenship and Immigration has absolutely nothing to do with this. But he's here today to give us his vision and his side and to listen what the difficulties that the province of Ontario is facing by dealing with the Conservative feds. Michael, it's all yours.
Good afternoon. How is everyone? Good. Nice to see you here today. I'd like to recognize my colleague from Queen's Park, Bas Balkison, the MPP for Scarborough Aging Court. Scarborough River, sorry, who's just in the back. I know Sue Wong was supposed to be here today, and I have Scarborough Aging Court, and obviously we have the member here, but Bas, welcome.
Scarborough Aging Court, welcome. Hey, Bas, why don't you come down and join us?
Come on, Baz.
So I'm going to talk a bit about the relationship between the provincial government, federal government in regards to immigration. Obviously, I have a little bit of a different perspective than the federal members here who look at the country as a whole. But I think there are some very, I guess, aligned issues that are affecting the province of Ontario that we all share. To capture this conversation, I just want to probably just draw reference to a document that we produced as a government last year called A New Direction. It's our immigration strategy here in the province of Ontario. And if you haven't had the opportunity to look at the document, I suggest you take a look at this document. And I actually just 3-4 minutes ago posted it on my Twitter account. If you go to @COTEAU, there's a link to the document. So @Coteau, and you can get that link. So from the federal perspective, there's on page 3 of this document, it's simply put, it says federal policies are hurting Ontario. And that's an actual fact. In 2003, we had roughly 152,000 immigrants coming into Ontario. 70% of those immigrants were for the economic worker class, so they came with specific skills. A decade later, the province of Ontario has moved from just about 50% of immigrants coming to Ontario in comparison to the countrywide perspective. We're at about 40% now. And our numbers, I think this year for the first time, has just reached below 100,000. So we've seen a substantial difference from 2003 until now. In addition to that, when Kevin was talking about programs like the provincial nominee program, and I'm sure everyone's well versed on it, and if you're not, it's a program that really allows us to identify specific people who fall into a specific category. It could be academic based, it could be specific skilled labor based, to fill those needs Ontario has. When you compare where Ontario is, compared to Manitoba and Alberta, we're at 1,300. Where Alberta, Manitoba is at 5,000. So policies that are positioned by the federal government are actually hurting this province. And we know from the time of Confederation, immigration was a shared responsibility. But the decisions that are being made now are unilateral decisions being made in Ottawa. And we have to ensure that the federal government takes into account the needs of this province. We have, in the province of Ontario, put forward this document, and it really has 3 objectives at the end of the day. It's to ensure that we attract the right people here to the province of Ontario. When I say right people, it's based on considerations like the fact that we have an aging population. We have new technologies and new needs within the province that we can't fill enough, and also we have a labor gap that exists, and there's other reasons that we need to attract a certain type of people. But we need to make sure that when people are coming here to the province, that they're ready to work and contribute to the economy. And obviously, there's refugee cases and compassion cases, which are part of the immigrant story in Ontario. But there's a certain percentage that we need to pull in to make sure that the province is positioned well. We also need to make sure that they have the types of services they need. So, for example, that's why our government invest almost $70 million a year into ESL classes. This year, in regards to settlement services, we've seen another cut by the federal government, and that cut equals, over the last 3 years, an $85 million cut to settlement services here in the province of Ontario. And then to respond to that, even though that has been a federal responsibility for quite some time, the provincial government actually had to increase its allocation to... So even though the provincial government's holding the line on spending in many areas, we've increased settlement service funding by 15% this year because there's such a dire need by agencies providing these services. So that's been one of our responses. And the third objective of our immigration strategy is to make sure, and Kevin talked about this also, about how do we take this diversity that's here in Ontario that, you know, is really unlike any other place in the world. How do we take that diversity and leverage it so we can position this province so it can be a strong player internationally when it comes to global competition? We know that the history of this province has been built on immigration. You know, I think everyone in this room, except if you're from, of course, the Aboriginal community, has an immigrant story. It may be 1 generation, 3 generations, 10 generations ago. We all have an immigrant story, and it's making sure that as we move forward as a province that we continue to draw from the benefits of immigration in Ontario. We position this province for success, and our strategy in Ontario, the first of its kind in the history of this province, is to do just that. So I'll end there. I know that we're going to talk about the country as a whole, but if there are questions about what we're doing here in the province of Ontario to strengthen the province as a whole and to ensure that there are opportunities for people, I can answer some of those questions. But I'd like to thank the whole team here, the GTA team, and our friend from Winnipeg, for putting this together and having me play a role in this. I appreciate the opportunity, and I'd love to hear some comments and questions later today. So thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Before I move on to the next part, I just want to let the members of the committee that are here, we're going to want to send Mubarak on, and Mubarak, where is he left? Oh, he's still here, okay. Ryan Ward, Ernie Lustig, Rosanna Cherbo, Nick Fidelis, Jim Karygiannis, and Rob Oliphant. I don't know if there's anyone else that I've missed. After the meeting, just come down here for a few minutes, okay? Thanks. And also all of the, and Judy as well, and yes, and all of the MPP, whoever's here at this stage, should stay too. I don't have to name everybody just now, okay, so don't go away. That's all. Okay, all right. Did Judy or Baz want to say a few words? No? No?
Let's hear from
people. Let's hear from people. Okay, great. Okay, yeah. People? Okay, yes. Now, questions can be asked on that mic so that everybody can hear what the question is, and so that we can all have a dialogue and so if you have a question, come down to that mic, please, and ask it from over there, okay? So we'll just priority, first come, first serve, so I don't have to worry about where you're sitting, and also it's easy for everybody to hear. And I will get away from here, and so I'll send my back to my colleagues, okay? So, if first up, go ahead. You're on, please.
Thank you very much for doing this. My name is Tatle Balibi. I'm in...
Can everybody hear okay?
Is the mic working? Just tap on the mic.
It sounds, yeah, it's working.
He's good.
You might have to lift it up.
He's good.
Oh, there you go.
You have to push, if you're coming down to speak, please push the button. Okay, super, thank you.
Yes, my name is Tatle Balibi. I'm a high school teacher with Toronto Catholic School Board, and I'm a member of the Pride for Eritrean Refugees for the Eritrean Catholic Church. Thank you very much for giving us this information. I think there is a need to see the bases like us who are working with refugees, even though my job is not with refugees. I do a lot of work with refugees, I can say I private sponsored more than 70 in the last 20 years. So I know exactly what's going on at this time. Especially I would like, we have all these issues you have said, but especially I would like to say something about refugees. As refugees, there is a private sponsorship which can be done by the sponsorship agreement holders or the group of 5. Now, the group of 5 sponsorship, since it's done individually, there is no one who can talk about this one, there is no one who can defend this program. The Conservatives last year, 1 year ago, they changed this head office at Civic Centre to Winnipeg from St. Clair. There is nothing in St. Clair. So after it's changed to Winnipeg, the processing time to give you the first response of approval, it's taking more than 7 months. When it was in St. Clair, we had a response within a month. So it's taking more than 7 months, and then after 7 months, they write you a letter saying that you did not mention all the refugees you sponsored, while they have the file number with them. They can find it, they have the file number. This is a big problem because I deal with many people who are sponsoring, I fill the forms for them, I respond because even though I have no time with these ones. So that's, I think, one big thing. If you can be very, I don't know, if you can do something with this program, when you email them or inform them, they say, no, don't ask us anything about lateness, tell us only if there is any change with what you are doing. The second thing is about the spouses. Many refugees we bring, they get married by going back where they came from, for example in Sudan, so that it's cheaper for them to get married than getting married here. The program was taking up to 6 months. Now it's taking like 2 years. So this is one big thing we have. The third issue is citizenship, which I know so many people, which I filled the forms. It has been, there are some people who applied September 2010 for citizenship. One of them did not even need to write the test because she was 55 years old, 56 years old. So that's the things, if you can do anything, I agree. And another thing is if there is any information, if there is any committee about that, I'm always available to do this one because we want to do something about this program. Thank you very much for listening.
You bring up a few issues that are all important. Let me just try to address it in this fashion. There have been changes in the refugee program in terms of staffing. I don't necessarily want to say that I know all of the details in terms of the changes. Where there's a specific program change, where you say there's a transfer of staff in and out, we know that there's been services that have been cut across the country, 16 offices or things of that nature. It's always best to contact me and let me know through my staff or my office directly, and then we can look into it. Generally speaking, the processing time in general for refugees is actually increasing. Like you, we're not satisfied with the responses that we're getting because more and more, you cannot talk to a live person. You're always talking on the telephone. And that causes a whole wide variety of other issues. So in that specific case, it's best just to let my office know where they closed the office. And you say they brought it to Winnipeg? I'm not 100% sure of that. So that's why I'd love to know if that's in fact true. So do get back to my office on that. With regards to marriages, across the board, they have been changing policy related to marriages, even that go beyond the refugees. And that is something in which we do need to look at. If you have ideas on how we can expedite it, in particular, some countries are more difficult because of security checks and so forth, getting the background documents. If there's ways in which you think we can process them quicker, maybe it's coming up with that visa exclusion, some form of a temporary visa that would enable it. I don't want to claim to know the answer to that particular question either, but I do appreciate your points, and we'll try to have some further dialogue and see what we can come up with. Thank you.
Okay, I think that Rob Oliphant wanted to say something.
I just want to thank you for those comments, and I happen to have just given about a 30-minute speech on all the changes that the Harbour government and Mr. Kenny have done around refugees, and you've hit on a few of them, but there are some significant things. And this is a government that prides itself on expanding the role of private organizations, families, and those kinds of things. Yeah, with respect to refugee sponsorship, they've actually shrunk the role greatly. So the number of privately sponsored refugees and the ability of groups, particularly faith communities and other groups, to bring in refugees of choice has shrunk tremendously. The government now basically has areas of the world that they will allow these private sponsorships in, whereas when the new refugee legislation came in, the Liberal government at the time thought that it was very important to have Canadians involved in refugee sponsorship because it built better relationships. Refugees being very different from immigrants. Refugees coming with a brokenness, coming with need for healing, coming with the kinds of trauma that has required them to seek a new homeland, not necessarily by their choice. And so by involving Canadians, by involving faith communities, by involving community groups, I happen to be in a group of 5 right now, to going through this process, you make a solid fabric of Canada. And so this is what this government is absolutely disentangling. We are actually moving away from citizen involvement in this and making good choices about where we can bring refugees from. Issues of health insurance now. The burden being placed on groups that want to bring refugees in around health insurance are becoming prohibitive. Areas, I mean, the Nairobi office in Africa, you cannot get a refugee processing agreement through it if you're holding a sponsorship agreement. These are all the kinds of things that are under the radar. And what we have to do is constantly be talking about them to raise the issue that this is what makes Canada a country that's respected in the world. So we're not only talking about making home for refugees, not only making a stronger Canada, we're also building our reputation in the world as the best place to live. And that's what this government is doing damage to. I could go on for hours about immigration, but just on that refugee issue, it's quite critical because they're an easy target for this government because people who don't know better immediately think there are people jumping the queue or people taking advantage of the system. Well, what we're really doing is talking about a small number, 10 or 12,000 people a year, that we can actually change their lives and change our country. So thank you for that.
Okay, next question. Who's in line? Come up. Don't have to just go up. When you're next, just go up. So this is, just get,
I don't need to already.
it's the light is on it. I think it's on automatic, so you should go up there. Go ahead.
It is. Okay, my name is Farah Satarzadeh. I am an immigration consultant. And there was a program that was referred to as a Canadian Experience class. I need to just give some information regarding compared to temporary foreign work. I think you mentioned that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So actually this program, I think, is very successful because it's people who come as a temporary foreign worker or as student, they have a chance after a year of working in some certain occupation, which is falls under NOC, like management, A&D. So have a chance because they had a practice and they learned language, they had a chance of learning, they have a better chance and usually they are successful. And processing time also, it's good, it's less than a year. I think we have to give some credit to Canadian Experience class. And that's one thing. Compared to temporary foreign worker and also federal skilled worker, which never worked, the point system is not just goes back when Kenny came in, it just goes way back. Okay, I think when it comes to immigration, we're looking for answers. Looking for answers, who actually, it doesn't matter what party comes, but we have to have good answers. Like, for example, also the global situation has changed in last like 7-8 years. We have to pay attention to not push our budgets So there has been changes, okay? It's, we all, if you say that conservative or Kenny did this, I'm not pro-Kenny, just saying this. But in general, I think we have to go to details. In general, we can just blame. And I am really updated on everyday news, every bulletin comes, everything. You can ask me any question you want. But the thing here is that even Liberal, they come to power, 2015, they have to be very, very detailed on what they're going to do. I didn't hear anything today here. What Liberals want to do with the backlog. I just heard the Critic saying that we have around 300,000. Yes, we do have around 280. I'm sorry.
We had 280,000.
Exactly. Federal skilled worker prior.
They're gone.
I know how they, yes, exactly. So there was a 280,000 skilled worker, and yes, it's bad. They said that prior to 2008, I'm not going into details, if they didn't open the file or officer even didn't do the selection, the money going to go back to the applicant.
I have to interrupt, I apologize, but I know that this is your business, you're a consultant, and I think it's, in fairness, we're here to listen to public, to people.
Exactly. So,
Yes, no, I'm sorry. I'm
Put
sorry.
a question,
You
but we-
put a question if you have to. You've been talking now for some time.
Okay.
Please put a question.
Sure. My question here is, what are the plans for removing the backlog?
There is no backlog, they just got rid of it.
No. We have a backlog in investor. You didn't mention investor.
All right, fine. There is some
Okay.
backlog somewhere else.
Do you know what investor program is? Okay, so I need to talk to someone who has idea of what the investor program is.
If you just hold on, Karen Lamoureux will answer the question.
Sure.
I think that there's, to the specific question in terms of backlogs, there's a way to do it and there's a way not to do it. What you don't do is you don't delete individuals that have been there. It's just not fair. You don't do it by compounding the problem by having ministerial instructions not well thought through, so you get an additional 150,000 plus added to it. The way you do it in dealing with the backlog is that you have to, you have a choice. You either start increasing your numbers.
And you're saying 150 now?
Well, you have a choice. You could start looking at increasing your intake of immigrants, which would allow you to deal with the backlog. You also can limit the number of individuals that are putting their applications in. So it's a combination of the two. You always got to look at it from the perspective of an immigration mixture. You cannot have, let's say for example, Canada has 250,000 immigrants a year. If I said to you we're going to have 100,000 parents and grandparents coming annually, that's not going to work. You have to take a mixture of everything from your entrepreneurs to your economics to your family reunification, and if you get the right mixture, you can then allow for a larger number coming in. You don't have the same requirements for temporary foreign workers, but what it means is that you have to approach it with the right attitude, and you have to be patient in working it through. When you talk about the Canadian Experience class, that's an excellent class. So is the economic. There are some issues in regards to the economic immigrant in terms of the point structures. We've all heard the stories of a doctor that's driving a taxi. We all hear of individuals that come to Canada with incredible credentials, but those credentials are not being recognized. We need to see stronger leadership coming from Ottawa, working with the provinces and the
Are they
different
going to do
stakeholders.
that? Okay, for example.
No, we don't want to debate. I'm just sharing with my
Okay, so it's very general. Okay.
One question at a time, please.
Okay, so, you asked your question, we need to let us, we can't take up the whole one.
It's okay.
One question. I'm sorry.
That's okay, but
We have to
you have
rotate.
to take care of the
Okay,
details, I think.
Yes, that's fair.
Good afternoon to all members. Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you all. My name is Sarah Millette. I am a Canadian citizen, fourth generation. I've been raised in a society who fights for the rights of every person, their speech and their religion. We are a kind people, a just people, a helping people. The Immigration and Refugee Board, along with the Canada Border Services Agency, have failed what we stand for in the case of my husband. We have not been able to have legal counsel. He is currently detained at a holding center and scheduled for removal on June the 11th. He is a citizen of the Gambia in West Africa. Annual Report 2012, Amnesty International. Gambia continues to restrict freedom of expression, government opponents, human rights defenders, and journalists were arbitrarily arrested and detained. Torture and other ill treatment were carried out by security forces, and there were unresolved cases of enforced disappearances. One example, we had some activists distributing anti-government t-shirts to end the dictatorship in West Africa. They were detained and arrested. One has been sentenced to 30 years. I'm here today to urge any member, any media, anybody for assistance. I need your help. We have to stop his removal at any opportunity that we can, for at least an opportunity for a pre-removal risk assessment. Mohammed is a good man. He is an educated man. He is in opposition of the government where he lives. He has family there. He fears for them. I will be where he is. We simply cannot go to the Gambia. We cannot step foot there with this removal. I'm already organizing a campaign to stop his deportation on the violation of his human rights for asylum in Canada. I have a petition that is growing, and I have his friends and his family from the UK military sending me their witness statements being notarized by their leader. I am contacting media sources for assistance, including Freedom Newspaper, operating out of the Gambia. This is about human rights. This is about justice. This is about Canada. This is about Canada fulfilling their promise to assist people in need of protection and show what we are supposed to stand for. Thank you. I need some help.
Not knowing the individual facts of the case, I can't speak to the case. However, we're deporting people where we should be deporting people. There's cases that they're saying we're not going to deport them until the situation there changes, and they're holding in abeyance. And if the situation changes until your hearing is done, then they will deport you. There's certain countries in the world that human rights are gone out the window. There's countries that are part of the G8 and the G20, the G20 that have absolute no human rights. And you will hear us advocate that if you want to be part of the G8 or the G20, or you want to deal with them, you must respect human rights, freedom of religion, and freedom of press. Unfortunately, there's why are part of the G20 and they're not respecting those adherences. So I would like to, for being myself, the office from Toronto, to sort of speak to you afterwards so we can see if we can provide any assistance to you. So I'm reluctant to speak publicly about a particular case or ask you questions that I don't think are pertinent to the rest. So,
yes, I appreciate that.
Okay. And I also see some other individuals that says no deportations to Iran. I haven't been to Iran in 2003 after Kazemi, and unfortunately I couldn't get a visitor visa under my Canadian passport, and I had to get a visitor visa as a Greek businessman, quote unquote, in order to see in Iran. I got to tell you, I went outside of jail. This is not a pretty situation, and Canada should really make good consideration before they deport somebody back to Iran. There's people that should be deported back to Iran, people that are part of this regime and they're not being deported.
Hello, my name is Irene Qureshi. I was born here. My parents actually came to Canada when Mr. Pierre Trudeau was the Prime Minister. So I've also met Mr. Justin Trudeau, a very wonderful man, and very hard worker, I can see that. But the reason why I'm here is because when I was a child, I actually went to Pakistan and I lived there for 5 years, and even when my cousins from Canada came over, it was like, wow, these people are from Canada. It's like the promised land, you know, it's like such a wonderful place they came from. We looked up to them so highly. And then we came back to Canada and we got that chance to be in this country again. And I just saw how wonderful it was and how diverse and multicultural. But as growing up, I ended up meeting like people who didn't have status because I was born here and they weren't. And some people with marital sponsorship issues, some people with children who just, committed an offense and they were being deported. how hard it was for them to even fight the case because they didn't have the financial support. And really, people are really struggling nowadays. And I just feel like immigration is so so stereotypicalized. It's like based on gender and financial need and health need. You have to meet a certain criteria to come here. And I always thought that Canada was all welcoming and all encompassing. So my question is, like, I mean, I'm just hearing about Jason Kenney, and I'm just, you know, it's really the immigrants who really make what Canada is what it is. And I just feel like even Jason Kenney must have nationality, and why is he being so biased? You know, this is not the Canada that I know, so.
Who should report it?
I just feel like he's being biased and he's bringing certain people, and I don't know why. There's no reason, really. Why is he doing this? I don't know why people are not asking him about this.
Well, I appreciate what it is that you're saying, and I think that many people get a better appreciation for how fortunate we are that have been put in your situation, right? Where you've gone abroad, and you've come back, and you come back, you're there as you already have status. And, you know, in my travels, whether it's in India or the Philippines or other places, you know, there is a genuine desire that people have in terms of Canada and the potential that we have. There are a number of issues. You make reference to marriages, and marriages is a very serious problem. I am constantly trying to get families reunited, especially where there's a marriage involved. And it has gotten more difficult. I have cases, for example, where they say, well, it's a marriage of convenience. Well, the father or the husband is now a father. The wife is, in fact, had a child in India, for example. Issues related to money. You know, love. You know, money's not an issue when it comes to love, and we need to really work on that file. You know, the answers that that have been given to date in regards to trying to resolve the issue has fallen far short, and it is in fact going to be a priority. One of the reasons why we're trying to go out into the different communities across the country is to try to generate ideas that we can incorporate into what we want to see as an election platform going forward, and policy generation. And in some areas, we'll be raising in the House of Commons, even in the short term. I appreciate your comments, very heartfelt.
Also, I was just thinking too about the new marriage law. I heard that how when people come here as spouse, they actually are not given any papers until 2 years.
Until 2 years.
And I just feel that's not right, because it's really, you're making these immigrants vulnerable, and who knows what situation they'll be in 2 years after they're married. And I just feel like it's not right to do that, and Canada should be more considerate to immigrants too, because after all, we all come from somewhere.
Absolutely, and in fact, when they made that announcement, I was on the record saying that it's not fair, that it will put individuals in a very awkward situation. You know, Jim's heard this story from me before. You know, my son married an American girl, and that was about 1.5 years ago. She's able to come to Canada. You know, after the wedding, she comes to Canada. She calls Canada her home. She's now been landed, and so forth. There is a double standard that's out there. You know, certain countries in the world you can go to, you can get married, and your spouse is with you. You know, I had someone at one of the town halls say, well, why doesn't that same principle apply for other nations around the world? Why can you not go and marry and then bring your spouse here and be processed while your spouse is here? There's a valid argument for that. And that's what I mean in terms of talking about ideas. This is something that came off from one of the floors. And this is something in which we're now going to have to look at and think about. Thank you.
I just want to say that Canada is a beautiful country, and I'm very lucky to be here. And I want to thank you all for working so hard and being here today.
Thank you very much.